This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is that not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
How did I do that? You're insane.
Well, welcome everybody to CoronaTV. I get to be a fanboy today. I might be a writer, but I'm a writer of boring business books and marketing books, even though my goal has always been to try and write unboring books or do it in my own irreverent or sometimes self-deprecating way, business books that are entertaining. But today I'm actually getting to interview my favorite author. It's kind of crazy. My favorite author, James Rollins, and I'll probably move between James and Jim, he's written a lot of books and he's moved into different genres, but the Sigma 4 series, 15 books in the series, I've read every single one. I even wanted to show one of them today, but I was looking through all my books and most of them all on Kindle. So there's no point in just showing a Kindle. What point does that prove? But still, he's going to be on the show and we're going to have a great time talking about storytelling, talking about what it is to be an author and the future of publishing and truth and fiction. So stick around and enjoy the next 50 minutes or so. But let's celebrate today the fact that it is Women's Equality Day, and every single day, common theme on CoronaTV, we get to fight for equality. We get to fight for the ability for talent, for voices to be heard, and to make sure that everyone has their opportunity to shine, because I'm a big believer in talent, and really so are you guys as well. So that, happy Women's Equality Day. I don't know if it is a happy day, because it will be happy when we don't have to celebrate the day anymore, obviously, because equality is just considered to be a done deal, right? To be completely, standard, not exception to the rule, not exceptional, but in fact, the norm. So Jim is my hump day guest. Tomorrow we got Joe and then Jim. So Jim, Joe, and Jim. It's Joe, you are in between the Jim sandwich. It's going to be a fun rest of the week, and I'm glad you're with me. So quickly, birthdays. Happy birthday to Ritesh, my fellow Tottenham Hotspur fan. Hope you're having a great day, my friend. And obviously on LinkedIn, there's David Levy, there's Satish, Kevin, Eric. Hope you're having a great day as well. No matter where you are, if you're stuck at home or just stuck in general, CoronaTV was created for you. The goal was to create a show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's a little bit of time left over, a little bit of business and marketing. And I think I've stayed true to that mission in almost 100 episodes of the show. Well, now it's time for our seated soliloquy. I'm going to get through this as quickly as I can so that you can spend time, hearing from and listening in on my conversation with Jim Rollins. And remember that afterwards, both of us will be going to the Zoom after show. And so you'll have an opportunity, should you choose to either watch it on Facebook or actually ask him a question yourself, where you get to become the interviewer and I get to sit back and enjoy the conversation. But today's seated soliloquy is about change, and not just change, dreams, and not just dreams, but dreaming change. And I decided to use an ice cave, which is a little bit of an Easter egg and a little bit of a hat tip to my guest today, without telling you more and without giving away anything as well. I've spent a fair amount of time thinking about the phrase, truth is stranger than fiction. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking in the gardens of the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, looking at everyone outside wearing masks and thinking to myself, I feel like I'm in an episode of Black Mirror. The creators of Black Mirror are equally freaked out. From what I heard, they halted production on the series because, as it turns out, truth is stranger than fiction. Well, today I have Jim Rollins on my show, and he has thought through many scenarios which may have been equally and even prophetically straddling this line. And so I began to wonder, what if the reverse was true? What if creators like Jim could reverse engineer solutions to some of the world's largest gaping and outstanding problems? We'll hear about books about viruses. What about a cure for COVID? I've long held and subscribed to Walt Disney's "If you can dream it, you can do it" North Star. And when it comes to imagination, anything and everything is impossible. Anything and everything is possible. Last week, we said goodbye to a true legend, Sir Ken Robinson. Sir Ken devoted a significant part of his life to championing the ability for us to dream. Dream big, break free from the shackles of societal norms, rules, and governance that inhibit our ability to think outside the box. He celebrated children's potential and commiserated on how our educational system, and with it our culture, has beaten the living hell out of individualism and free thinking. Well, it's time to change that. It's time to put down the phones in favor of a good book, fiction above nonfiction. It's time to begin every sentence with the words, what if? It's time for humanity to become the ultimate solution provider by providing solutions to life's problems. We can do it. We know how to dream. We just forgot how. It's time to wake up from our slumber, our numbness, our lethargy, and inspire endless and transformational change. It's time. It's about time. Well, now it's about time to bring on my guest. And let me just take an opportunity to tell you a little bit about him. Jim Rollins is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of international thrillers. His writing has been translated into more than 40 languages and has sold more than 20 million books. The New York Times says Rollins is what you might wind up with if you tossed Michael Crichton and Dan Brown into a particle accelerator together. It's a very good description. Rollins unveils unseen worlds, scientific breakthroughs, and historical secrets matched with stunning suspense. As a veterinarian, he had a practice in Sacramento for over a decade and still volunteers at local shelters. Nowadays, Rollins shares his home up in the Sierra Nevada mountains with his 2 golden retrievers, Echo and Duncan. He also enjoys scuba diving, spelunking, I don't even know what that is, kayaking, and hiking. Of course, he loves to travel and experience new places around the world, which often inspire his next globe-trotting adventure. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Jim Rollins. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Joseph. It's an honor. I mean, you are the prime example of how to pivot in this new environment. You know, going from what you're doing now to 100 different interviews and shows. That's just amazing.
Well, it's what we make it up as we go along.
I think we're all doing that now.
I'm telling you, and it's fun because, you know, I try and actually challenge myself almost on an episode by episode basis to do things differently, you know, to try and do something new. It might be a camera angle. It might be, you know, this new Kramer-like shirt that I'm wearing, but often it's part of the process, you know. Sure. Even, you know, fun facts, which, you know, we may as well just get into these fun facts. That was something that came, you know, that it almost came on a whim. now I love it so much that I just want to keep doing it. But before we get there, let's just look at a few comments. So my mom, my biggest fan, and I'm her biggest fan. She's watching. Chip Griffin says, should be a good show today. And then Chip says, never say a word when you don't know what it means. Well, what is spelunking? Is it a game?
It's a weird word. It sounds vaguely pornographic. Jim spelunks on a regular basis. It's caving. I'm an avid caver. I went to school. I got my veterinary degree at the University of Missouri, which is sort of cave central. And so when everybody else was out there, doing float trips down the rivers, with a 6-pack of beer, for some reason I decided I wanted to go underground. So joined a caving club, and to this day I still go caving. Initially, I thought I was going to give it up because my waistline began to get a little bit bigger. And one of the challenge when you're traversing a wild cave is trying to get down one of those little holes, and my waist was getting a little bit too big. And so I remember I was at a grotto meeting, which is what they call these caving club meetings. And there are these different people that will step up and talk about their last caving trip, slideshows or videos of their last adventure. And this gentleman came up and he did this very technical description of this cave-in system we went to. It was a very challenging cave, a lot of rope work to traverse it. And I was in the audience at that point going, I like caving. I like talking about caving. I like, hearing about these guys' trips, but I'm probably not going to really do it that much more. Knees are getting a little bit creaky. Waist is getting a little bit larger. I was approaching my 52nd birthday at that date. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to give up that hobby. Well, this gentleman that was talking about his recent caving trip was 65 years old. So I'm thinking, well, if this guy at 65 can still traverse this very challenging cavern system, I'm just using my age as an excuse. So I basically then dedicated myself to get back in shape, to get that waistline trimmed back down again, to get learn some new techniques, and become more active in the caving community again.
Well, we got a lot of comments about it, including the fact that spelunking is batty. Chip has a pun a minute, so watch out for him. And James said, I assume this love of caving is what inspired your novel Subterranean. Yeah,
again, I've had no formal training in writing. So if you've read any of my books, you'll realize he's had no formal training in writing. But when I was writing my first book, one of the things I had been sort of ingrained from my self-taught path to becoming a writer was to write from a point of passion. Is not to chase the market. Don't think, well, this is popular, so I'm going to Bridges of Madison County came out, so I'm going to write a book like Nicholas Sparks. I'm going to chase after that market that is very popular. But you should be writing from a point of passion. You should be writing what you love to read, because readers have a great nose on them. They will sense when an author is inauthentic. If they think, if you're chasing that market, you don't know that genre really well, you haven't read deeply both into the past and present of what's going on in that genre, readers are going to sense that you don't really understand this genre, you're not really passionate about it, and that could be a big turnoff. So again, I wanted to write from a point of passion. I read a lot of, growing up, a lot of, action adventure, a lot of thrillers, a lot of mysteries, and I love caving. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write my first novel, Subterranean, it takes place almost entirely 2 miles underneath Antarctica in a cavern system that's discovered there. A team gets lost in there, they vanish, a second team has to go in and try to find them. That's where the story starts. So it's basically a big spelunking adventure from almost page 1 to the end of the novel. So
Wonka Bar says, I was watching The Cave the other night and thinking of James. So there you go. Thank you, Wonka Bars. And
so was I. Yeah, I watched the same movie. I thought, oh, that reminds me of Subterranean a little bit.
I thought you were going to say you were thinking of Wonka Bars at this, which would have been perfect. So you never know. And just a few hellos as well. Joey Dumont, you'll probably see him in the Zoom after show. And Stavros said, glad to be watching again. I guess life got in the way. Stavros, welcome back. And Jan said, great to have unrestricted access with Jim today. It's been, in fact, Jan has a follow-up question for you. I guess I'm just going to just follow the comments. He said, any difference psychologically with spelunking water caves?
I get that question asked a lot on book tours. Jim, you're an avid scuba diver. I took that sport up actually when I moved to the West Coast, because the cavern system of the West Coast aren't quite as challenging, exciting as they are more in the Midwest. When I came out here, I thought I'm going to explore something different. When I came out here in 1985, it was my first time to actually see an ocean. That's how landlocked I was for most of my life. So I decided to take up scuba diving. So people go, well, you scuba dive. And when I wrote my third novel, Deep Fathom, it almost all takes place underwater, that book. And then I love caving. So that, you must surely enjoy combining those two sports, which is cave diving. No, cave diving to me is a death sport. I've heard many colleagues that have, many colleagues that have passed away from not being careful enough in cave diving. So I do not cave dive.
So there you go. And now we know. Well, now if you want to find out something else about Jim, we get to what we call fun facts. And there are many fun facts about you. The first one is that, now let's see if I got it right. When I read this, by the way, the first time, I thought to myself, what the hell is this comment? I can still neuter a cat in under 30 seconds. And I hadn't quite made the connection that you started out as a veterinarian, but that's one fun fact.
Exactly. I mean, it would be a weird thing if I was not a veterinarian going around neutering cats.
I was like, why would you do that?
I was thinking, prior to this, I'm going to, I shared that little fun fact, but I thought, well, I should probably demonstrate. I should prove that I can actually do it. And, I thought I was going to wander around the neighborhood with like an open can of tuna and try to
hang on a second. That would be unprecedented. That would be the kind of bad virality. In fact, I think all virality these days is bad. Whether they're pandemics or whether it's, I often say, marketers, they always want viral success, and the only kind of viral these days is bad. I'm much more of a slow burn myself. But speaking of slow burns, here's something else about you that people may not know, which is that you've
I wish my body looked like that.
Yeah, well, I was surprised that you were able to keep your head so clean, which is amazing.
Amazing, yeah, exactly.
But you've completed 4 Tough Mudders now in 4 years.
I live up in Lake Tahoe, and they have a Tough Mudder event every year. Not this past year because of COVID, but I just got a sort of I was trying to get to. I mentioned it before about trying to cave, so I was trying to get back in shape, and I thought, well, this would be a sort of a goal. I'm going to try to, this day, try to do Tough Mudder by summer, and so I had to get in shape, and so it was fun to compete. And then, every year I try to see if I can, shorten my time. Some of the obstacles I was not able to do my first couple go arounds. I would, have to sort of fail my way through one of the obstacles. So, the last Tough Mudder, my goal was to not only do the Tough Mudder, but they have like an extended version of the Tough Mudder where if you've done Tough Mudders in the past, you're allowed to go through another couple miles of obstacles beyond the normal course. So that was a lot of fun, and my goal was to complete every obstacle, not to fail my way through them.
So there is, you may have picked up a slight Staten Island accent, which I'm sure you were pegging from Staten Island. I know that, or Long Island. It was one of the islands. But I'm from South Africa originally, and there are 2 things that I would add. One is there is have you been to South Africa?
I have not been to South Africa, no.
When you go, you have to go visit the Kango Caves. Very touristy and very commercial, right, with lights and everything, but incredible stalagmites, stalactites, and there's a third stalag as well. The one of the relatives of mite and tite, the ones that actually come from top and bottom and join. But that was and then the other thing is there is it's not quite Tough Mudder, but there is an extreme marathon in South Africa. There are many extreme things, the Comrades, etc. But there is a race called the Otter Trail, which you might like when you're not writing books and turning books into movies.
Well, maybe that'll give me an excuse to go to South Africa then.
I think so. Well, I mean, if the spark today is a Sigma Force novel set in South Africa, I mean, it's just part of the research process. So, got to do it. So what else did I learn about you? Well, first of all, you didn't need to run around with a can of tuna because we actually got a never seen before photo of you about to neuter a cat. So you can see, this is also part of the process, Jim, which is each time the purpose is to make the Photoshop worse and worse.
Well, you're succeeding.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And here is the third interesting thing about you, which is you are an avid collector of fossils, including a chunk of T-Rex that sits next to your signed first edition of Jurassic Park. The reason why I found this, archived photo of you is that little bit of amber, which also reminded me of a book that I just read. And the dangers that can come from releasing anything from amber. I think the lesson learned there is just leave amber alone.
Exactly, don't touch amber. But Jurassic Park was always, for obvious reasons, a big inspiration for my writing. I've always loved Michael Crichton. And when I was writing Subterranean, the book we just talked about, again, first novel, writing from a point of passion, going to do this sort of caving adventure, but I'd never written a novel. When I sort of entertained the idea of maybe getting published, my first goal was I just wanted to get a short story published. And so I wrote a bunch of short fiction, did that for 4 years, because that's all I thought I could fit within my life of owning my clinic and running a clinic. Was I only had gaps in time to write. So I thought all I thought I could fit in my gaps of writing were short stories. I only had a short time frame in which to dabble with writing. So for 4 years, I wrote short fiction. Not a single story ever got published. My end goal, of course, was to maybe walk into a bookstore one day and find a book on a shelf, with my name on it. That'd be so cool. Did not ever think it was going to be a career change. I just thought, I'm an avid reader. I like telling stories. If you read a lot, it's like throwing gasoline on that corner of your brain that spins stories. So there was that goal there to just get one book into a store. So I began working on Subterranean, but I didn't know how to transition necessarily from writing all the short fiction I had done for 4 years to switching over to a novel. Very different bird. So I thought, rather than reinvent the wheel, I had a copy of Jurassic Park on my shelf above my computer, and I used that as a template. I thought, I didn't know how to pace and structure a novel. So rather than having to figure it out myself, I thought, well, I'm just gonna, look to one of my my mentors, somebody and an author I looked up to, and so I just thought, well, when does Michael Crichton first, introduce a dinosaur in his book? Well, that's someone introduced one of the creatures in my book. When does the hero walk onto stage? That's when my hero is going to walk onto stage. And what page does is there the first death? Well, that's when I'm going to kill off one of my characters in that book. So I almost used it as a roadmap on how to work my way through on pacing and structuring a story. So that book, is enshrined in my office here, next to that T-Rex chunk of jaw, which I really enjoy. Is that what's interesting about that chunk of jaw is that besides having, if you want to, I'll grab that. If you can pause a second, I'll not pause.
Yeah.
But just hold that thought.
That's awesome. I'm intrigued.
You can see just in the back behind my head is there's a chunk of mammoth tusk back there too. I don't know if you saw it. So this is the oops. So this is the chunk of T-Rex. So they cool teeth.
Wow.
But as a veterinarian / evolutionary biologist, what really fascinated me is if you look here, you can see these other teeth right here coming in. Is that it just shows the biology of the beast. And this is the next level of once they lose this tooth comes in almost like a shark's tooth. I'm just fascinated that not only is this a cool fossil, it actually demonstrates the biology of the T-Rex there too. So, anyways, weird things that fascinate me.
No, that's incredible, and I'm glad you showed it. James asked, "Have you ever met Michael Crichton? And if so, what was your relationship with him?"
I did. I met Michael Crichton a couple times. The first time was at Book Expo in New York, and that's a big trade show for the publishing industry. And they bring in a lot of authors, and they have mass signings where they give away free books, and then there's the author there to sign all those free books. And I think at that point, either I only had like 2 or 3 books published, so I was fairly new, and so I got a chance to meet my idol, Michael Crichton, wonderfully generous and polite gentleman. So we were all, being that he was with my same publishing house, we were in the same sort of block of authors. So I was seated at like one side of this this long table of authors, and then we all had our little chain of line where people were lining up to get their book signed. And Michael Crichton was at the other side of the hall. Now, of course, Michael Crichton, as you can well imagine, had a line much longer than me. But I decided that I was going to make my line move very slowly. So I began doodling in the copies of this novel. So if you ever see a signed copy of my book, usually there's a doodle. Each book has a little different doodle that I doodle into the book. It came from this reason. I was trying to slow down that line, so that Michael Crichton, of course, he was having to, sign really fast to get through his long line. So at one moment, because I was so slow, my line was a little bit longer than Michael Crichton's line. So I had somebody take a picture just so I could prove that, look, I'm more popular than Michael Crichton. So
that's a beautiful story, and it's also interesting to see, it's not even the writing process, but those humble beginnings in terms of actually almost not necessarily a derivative piece of work, but the idea of a benchmark and being able to use that as a springboard. And I think sometimes, I started this show obviously for people that were stuck at home, or, whether it was in lockdown or whether it was someone who had been furloughed. But there are people that have the opportunity now to follow their dreams and follow their passions. And sometimes, not sometimes, maybe oftentimes, the hardest place to begin is at the beginning, is figure out what is the first thing you do. So I love those stories. I want to go back just one small step before, which is you're a veterinarian, you love writing, what is that spark that actually, because there's almost like the, not so much audacity, but this ability, it's a dream, it's a beautiful dream to say, let me write. But when did you discover the love of writing? It couldn't have been then, it must have been way before.
I always wanted to, again, I think I was an avid reader. I don't know, again, you can just see I got, shelves and shelves of book everywhere. And that's, trimmed down from when I moved into the smaller house. I had a much smaller office, so I had to trim a lot of it down. But, I think if you're an avid reader, there's a point, I think all of us at some point want to maybe tell our own story. And, I was raised with 3 brothers and 3 sisters. So there was, do the count, that's 7 of us. And so I was sort of the storyteller of the family. My goal was to terrorize my younger brothers and sisters. If tears were involved, all the better. So there's that part of my personality too. But I never thought you could make a career as a writer. I thought maybe you had to have some type of, literary genetic background to be able to become a successful writer. Maybe you had to be, the stepchild of Fitzgerald, or some type of Mark Twain's long lost grandson. So I never really give it much thought. I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian from 3rd grade, and there's a path that was very concrete on how to become a veterinarian. You do this, this, and this, you can become a veterinarian. Whereas the path to become an author is not quite so clear. You can do this, 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 and fail horribly as a writer. So I took the path towards being a veterinarian. But I kept reading, and I remember in my last year in veterinary school, there was still that desire to write even then. I was just about to graduate, just about to start my career. I remember I was doing an emergency shift, which all the students had to do. We had to cover the ER, not the ER, the intensive care unit at the university hospital, veterinary hospital, from midnight to 8 a.m. And so they would cycle different students through. You're there by yourself from midnight to 8. And the day I was there was like maybe one case. There wasn't a whole lot of monitoring that had to be done, but you had to be there. So I remember actually at even that point, fiddling with writing a short story, even in that situation. But again, I sort of gave it up once I became a veterinarian. Life got very busy because when you graduate, you're the low man on the totem pole at whatever office you happen to be working at. At that point, they didn't have cell phones. You're carrying a beeper around to be called for emergency shifts. And so again, I kept reading, but I convinced myself I had no time to write. And I thought, if ever life got a little bit less hectic, maybe I'd consider it. And so then I, started my own clinic, which is its own kettle of fish in regards to even adding another level of time-consuming stress. Now, besides being a veterinarian, now you have to, wear that business hat. And so life got even busier. And then eventually my clinic got successful enough that I hired a second veterinarian to help out. And when I hired them, I gave them the beeper. And at that point, life got a tiny bit less busy. And I'm pausing because I don't know whether I want to give you the shorthand version or the embarrassing version of why I started to write. And I will, because you've been so kind to have me on your show, I will tell you the truth. My usual answer is, when I was turning 30, it was a pivotal point in my life. It's that decade change, and I knew I want to do something different. And so I thought I'm going to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring and try to write. That is not the truth. You'll hear me if you look on prior interviews. I will say that occasionally, especially if it's on like a radio interview where we have a very short period of time in which to talk. So I will give you the little bit longer version. So
Correct.
2 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing payroll because I had at that point 24 employees. So it took me a while to go through payroll. And I had the television sort of droning on in the background. So, this is back in 1992. So what is on at 2 o'clock in the morning in 1992? Infomercials. So there's just a series of infomercials going on in the background. And I'm just doing my, trying to get through my payroll. And all of a sudden there's this loud voice, booming voice calling from behind me. And it's so loud and so demanding and so powerful, I have to turn around and start paying attention. And it's Tony Robbins. And he's plugging his, 30 days to change your life. It's like a 1-day series of cassette tapes that he wants you to order. Just listen to cassette tape a day for 30 days, your life's going to be transformed. Well, if you ever listen to Tony Robbins, eventually my head starts nodding. I must do whatever Tony Robbins says. Big hair, big teeth, you must obey him. So I ordered his tape series, thinking about, well, maybe I'll, give me some ways of motivating my staff, and who knows what it might lead to. So I get the tape series. Again, it's 30 individually wrapped cellophane cassette tapes. I open the first cassette tape, pop it in. Tony Robbins, going to change your life. Just, stay with me, or you'll be amazed at what's going to happen. And it's just you need to stop the tape, and I'm going to give you your first sort of instruction. He says, okay, now take out a sheet of paper. Just write down what you would like to do for the rest of your life, a big goal in your life, whether it's a small goal or a large goal. Just assign a goal to yourself, and dismiss any preconceptions you have about your financial background, your educational background. Just write what you want to do on that sheet of paper. So I'd already been a veterinarian, but there was a desire to write. So I wrote, I want to publish my first novel and write my first novel and see it get published. So wrote that down. Tony Robbins said, okay, you've written something down on that piece of paper, turn over to side B. So as for anybody younger, there's side B's to cassette tapes. So I flip over the cassette tape, pop it in. Tony Robbins says, okay, pops back on. It's okay, now you've written something on that sheet of paper, you have a goal. Now, before the sun sets on this day, you have to make a step towards that goal. So I had to follow Tony Robbins because he is very commanding. So I got out got a little typewriter and some blank sheets of paper, and set up a little area in my house that was going to be my writing nook, my little writing corner. So that began my career as a writer. I never, by the way, there's other 30 tapes are still wrapped in their cellophane. I never read more than just that first one. That's all I needed, was that nudge. And so again, now I've written, I think I'm reading my 38th novel right now. Why I generally don't tell the story out loud is I'm secretly fearful that one day I'm going to knock on the door, or hear a knock on the door, and I'm going to open the door, and there's going to be a big guy with big teeth, big hair. I'm Tony Robbins. You owe me royalty for starting your career. So yes, I owe my career to Tony Robbins.
Wow, I mean, you could put that as your fun fact. And it's so funny because during this shelter in place or lockdown, one of my releases has been running, and for the most part it's Howard Stern, and then it's Tim Ferriss, and then I kind of pepper in a bunch of other things. Been listening to the story of James Arthur Ray, a Wondery series of self-help that went bad, The Secret that went bad, and Tony Robbins is obviously a big part of that. But this is a beautiful story because for me, the key phrase, the first step, is the one that bubbles up. Taking the first step. James says he's turning 29, the grand old age of 29. And he loves it because his takeaway, I guess, is I'm not too old.
Yep.
But the reality is you're never too old. The key is to take, I think, the first step.
No, I mean, there's the book that's out there right now. I'm just trying to, I'll always call it the Crawdad book. Why am I blanking on the name? It's been on the #1 New York Times fiction list for, I think it's going on a second year. And
someone will say in the comments, hopefully.
Please do, because I don't know why I'm just drawing a blank on that. But the author is also her agent is my agent. So I heard a little bit of the sort of the backstory. She wrote she did like a nonfiction book, and then now this is her first fiction piece. But I don't remember her exact age, but I believe she's over 70 years old. This is her first novel, and it's now spent almost 2 years. Yes, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Thank you, Tom.
So, that's her first novel, and she's written it. Again, I wish I know I was going to have this conversation. I would have looked up her exact age. But Delia Owens, I believe that's her name, started writing her first novel after being 70 years old, and it's now spent almost 2 years at the #1 spot on the New York Times list.
The one thing that I've seen a lot of trends during this lockdown amongst fellow authors. I've seen business writers, nonfiction, crossing over into fiction, which scares the hell out of me, because I'm not sure that I have the ability or the capability to write fiction, but it represents something new, something to discover, and if not for me, for someone else. Another trend that I've witnessed is specifically in the publishing business is shorter books. So it's almost like the equivalent of a TED talk, but amongst books. I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you have evolved, how your process has changed with the reality of the publishing business and industry changing so unbelievably, almost cataclysmically.
Yeah, my first book was published in 1997. So at that point, when my book got published, I was the cutting edge author, because I had a website, which was just so weird and new for people. I remember when Facebook started, I sent an email to my publishing house and said, hey, this Facebook stuff is going to kick off big. I think it's a great way for authors to communicate to their readers. We should get on board with that. Will you help me, figure out the do's and don'ts and, the dynamic of this whole Facebook thing. And the note I got back from my publisher was, it's a waste of time. That's never going to be anything. So I ignored them, and I was one of the first people on again, one of the first authors experimenting with social media in its various incarnations. And so I'm always looking at, paying attention to those trends, because things have rapidly changed. Because back when I was first published, there was not anything like ebooks. So now, we've seen the rise of Amazon, the popularity of ebooks, the self-publishing. So it keeps evolving. Now we're in the COVID situation. So, I had to sort of pivot from doing a full book tour to doing everything online. So it's a challenge. My goal when I was writing, like I said, you need to write from a point of passion. But if you had zoomed in on my bookshelf over here, you're going to see that I don't just read one genre. I grew up reading almost everything. I love science fiction. I love fantasy. I love thrillers. I love Clive Cussler's sort of historical action adventure novels. I love Tom Clancy. I love spy thrillers. So it was hard for me to pick one thing to write. So when I wrote Subterranean, I thought, well, that's I'm going to try doing a Jurassic Park type of book set underground. But over the years, I've dabbled with other genres because I read a bunch of different genres. So I want to keep myself fresh. So I generally have been doing a thriller a year and then something else the other part of the year. And I'm always fearful because I read occasionally these comments, this author, used to be great. Now they feel like they're just phoning it in. Or it feels like they're just, treading things over and over again. And I'm fearful that, of becoming that author. So I try to stay fresh by doing something else. So I've, early in my career, I was doing some fantasy novels. I've done a middle school series. I've done some collaborative projects. I've done sort of a horror series and it's a part of a collaborative project. So I keep jumping around on that as that other book of the year, just to keep myself motivated and feel. So when I go back to writing my Sigma novel, when I'm returning to those characters, they are like characters that feel like friends that I'm returning to, versus, oh my gosh, I have to write another Sigma novel. So I think it helps keep me fresh by playing around in these different genres, seeing else, how I can challenge myself, both as a writer and as just my own self-satisfaction of jumping into another genre that I love to read.
Well, and you have unrestricted access coming out, which is exactly that, right? Mixing it up.
Exactly. It's basically a collection, an anthology of a lot of my short stories that I've written over the 20 years. Like I said, none of my short stories prior to getting published were ever published. But once you sort of have your foot in your door, people are happy to publish your short fiction, apparently. So I've written several short stories, and but when my house proposed doing this anthology, because all my short stories are distributed and some were only available in ebook format, some were in esoteric anthologies that have vanished over the years, and so my house suggests, why don't we do an anthology of all these short stories you've written? I thought, well, I didn't want to just sell people old work. So one of the things I did was I did new introductions to all the short stories. So I realized these short stories from the beginning of my career to the present day offer sort of an arc of my career over these 2 decades. I'm able to use these short stories as almost like Stephen King did with his on writing, is using them as a way of showcasing, the path of how I became a new author to where I am today. Why did I tell these stories? Why did these tell these stories then? But also I added a new novella. It's almost like a mini novel. It's a 20,000 word short story featuring Tucker and Kane, a pair of characters that first appeared in Bloodline, one of my Sigma novels. It's a Army Ranger and his military war dog. And so I got to write another story with them that's featured that's new to the anthology. So that comes out at the end of September.
And I'll put a few links up to all the books. Obviously, Last Odyssey coming out in paperback. We'll also talk about your new Sigma Force novel. I love hearing about the diversity of not just your reading, your vociferous reading, and your inspiration and your research, but also how it keeps you fresh. And so it's less about the crossover, and it's more just about this natural journey or exploration. I don't know if this is, I'm going to quote like a Bill Maher line, which is, I don't know this for a fact, but I just know it's true. So I don't actually know if this is true, but I heard that Stephen King's process is that he sits down and he writes 500 words every day. And if it takes him 8 hours, he'll get those 500 words out. And if he's inspired, he might write 5,000. I would love to get a little insight into your writing process, whether it's your inspiration, a muse. Is it a time of day? Is it a day of week? Is it a specific place? What inspires you to write, and how do you write?
Well, I'm pretty regimented. Again, doing 2 books a year requires me not to wait for inspiration. I can't remember who said this quote. Somebody said, I only write when I'm inspired. Luckily, I'm inspired at 9 a.m. every morning. Because there's a business side to writing. There's deadlines that have to be met. There's obligations with the publishing house because they're doing things to line up their publication, and you don't want to miss your deadline. So when I was first starting to write, I was writing in cracks in time. And I think you're a writer, you always have to find that accommodation between your professional life and your personal life. In this case, my personal life would be writing. So where can I find time in which to write? So I kept trying to find that accommodation that was comfortable. So first I thought, well, I'm going to write 3 pages a day. That was not comfortable. So I qualified it. I'm going to write 3 double-spaced pages a day, which again is pretty much basically a page and a half. And not every day. I'm going to do 5 out of 7 days of the week. Once I sort of found that balance, I found that I could write basically a page and a half or 3 double-spaced pages, 5 out of 7 days of the week without feeling like I'm neglecting my personal life or I'm feeling it's impinging upon my professional life. There was that balance that was comfortable. And it's surprisingly how quickly a novel will accumulate on your desk if you do 3 pages a day, 5 out of 7 days of the week. And I always thought if I ever get rid of my day job, that I'd be much more productive. Because again, I was doing those 3 double-spaced pages in just cracks in time while I had a busy, successful veterinary practice that was taking up 10, 12, 14 hours a day. So now I am a full-time writer. I do some volunteer work with my veterinary degree, but pretty much my day is my own to write. And what I found was that I am much more productive. I write 5 double-spaced pages a day. I found that is a wall I hit. I wish it wasn't so. I wish I could be much more productive, but I find that and it takes me about an hour for me to write one of those double-spaced pages. So 5 pages is about 5 hours of new writing. The rest part of the day is the business side of writing. It's research. It's calling, scientists and historians to double check things. It's going online and just making sure that some of the details, like where the Starbucks is in Kuala Lumpur, make sure I get that correct in the novel. And that pretty much completes my 8-hour day. And I found that by doing 5 double-spaced pages, 5 out of 7 days of the week, I can get 2 novels done every year. And again, it doesn't feel burdensome. It feels comfortable. And I think all writers, or ask people that aspire to be writers, you're going to have to find whether that's 500 words like Stephen King, or whether that's 1 page that's double-spaced. You need to find that balance and then stick to it. You don't necessarily have to wait for inspiration. I've got two notes next to my writing computer. One is the 5 senses. I list all 5 senses because a lot of times when you're writing a novel, you write it like a movie running in your head. And so you write it like a movie where everything is just visual. And you oftentimes forget you need to fold in those other senses, like what's things are smelling like, or hear little subtleties of hearing, or even senses of touch that really bring a scene to life. But on the other side of my computer, I have a little note saying, today I give myself permission to write crap. Because if you wait for inspiration, if you wait to think, I've got to be really just on my game today, or I'm not going to be successful. No, most writers know there's gonna days you're just gonna write crap. You're just gonna, those 500 words that Stephen King's writing that day, he may hate them. They may end up on the cutting room floor, but he's got to write those pages or those words. And I did the same thing. Is at times I will think, oh, this scene it's pivotal to the novel. It's intimidating me. I'm not feeling inspired to write it, but it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Time to put those pages together. And oftentimes I'll find I will start writing what I believe to be crap, and it's just fine. It just works perfectly for what I need to do. But you can set yourself up to fail by just thinking you have to be inspired and you have to write perfectly. Just get it on the page.
I mean, there is so many nuggets in that, and in the time we have left, there were so many things I wanted to say. The first is I also share something truthful with you, which is one of my earlier muses was I thought I would be like Ernest Hemingway, which was basically to drink myself into, as Mike Tyson would say, into oblivion. And I was inspired, and I would sit down and drink scotch after scotch after scotch and write. And it turned out the next day when I looked at it, not only was it crap, but it actually wasn't even, I don't even think they were words. I mean, I think it was just, there was a lot of quotey and a lot of ipso Lauren dictum. But here's another author. We get to the segment in the show where I try to stump guest with a quote. It's connected to you're going to get this one for sure. This is connected to the seated soliloquy, to the actual origins of truth is stranger than fiction. Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't. I'm sure you know who said that. But it is interesting, even if you don't, because this is the person who said
it was a science fiction writer. Was it Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov who did that? Or
no, it's basically the only hint I can give people is generally it's one of two people. If you distort any quote, it's either Winston Churchill or it's this man. And should I reveal?
Yes, please.
So the reveal.
I use that quote all the time. It's Mark Twain. Of course, it'd be Mark Twain.
When in doubt, just go with Mark Twain.
Exactly.
But I'm not even sure I quite understand it. I just like it. It's intriguing. It feels a bit Yogi Berra on me. I go, wow, that's interesting. And the more I think about it, the less I really understand it. But
that's why I started. At the end of all my novel, actually, not all my novels, my later novels, I started including an addendum that's sort of a what's true, what's not. If you look at my early books, it's not there. I started adding that because a lot of the topics I handle, whether it's the science or the history, sounds pretty outlandish, but they're based on the truth. And I began doing that because of for two reasons. Number one, I was getting a lot of emails asking the same question over and over again. Is this true? Where's the basis for this? Where do you hear about this? And rather than having to answer email after email or comment after comment on Facebook or on some other social media, I thought I'm just going to put it at the end of the book. That way I can save myself a lot of time. But also it was because of a 1-star Amazon review. Not that I haven't got my share of 1-star Amazon reviews, but it was, I was really enjoying Jim's book, and it's just, it was clicking along just great. But I got to this one part and it just so threw me out of the story. It was so stupid. It was so outlandish. I can't believe this is a jump the shark moment for James Rollins. So unbelievable. So I just couldn't finish the book. And the problem with that is that the thing they was having a problem with was true. It was factual. But it sounded so crazy that it threw him out of the story to the point where he couldn't finish it. So I thought, well, I'm going to, lay down what's true and what's not at the end of all my stories, just to somewhat substantiate that, some of the stuff's pretty weird, but it's based on fact.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that part of the book. I showed a couple of quotes from comments from Rose and from Hans. I love the blurring too, and I love the guessing part of it, which is, and in a way, the more specific and truthful something is, like to your point, where the Starbucks is, especially if you've been, to Istanbul and you've seen the Starbucks there, it makes it so much more authentic, and yet you're still suspended in this, disbelief of being transported somewhere else. And that's obviously the art and why you are as as prolific an incredible writer as you are. I want to give you another compliment, if I may, because this is the part where if people are still watching, and they still are, I think they would share this with me. I think you are an innovator, but there's, the Facebook story was interesting to me, and the website story was interesting to me because, I've written books on influencer marketing before, and joining the conversation. That was one of my books, Join the Conversation. It's not commonplace to see someone as generous and gracious as you are with your time. But I can see where it comes from. It's from a love for animals. And in this case, I would like to don't neuter me, but I'm one of your cats. But I think also it's the importance and the power of community, and fostering community. And I think you've been doing that through email, through digital. The fact that you would be on my show is fantastic. And you might not be traveling on book tours, but an hour and a half is still an hour and a half. And I think I just want to call it, as I see it, which is, it is incredibly appreciated, not just because I am a host and a content creator, but I'm a fan and I'm a customer as well. And I'm even more of a fan than I was coming into this. So I see that in you. And, I think it's also, it's also manifested in the fact that your new book, or coming down the pike, Kingdom of Bones, cover to be revealed. So you're dialing into the right aspects of involving and creating this beautiful relationship and dialogue with your reader.
Well, what I did actually for Kingdom of Bones, again, what's really cool about social media is, again, when I started, there was no social media. You occasionally get, it was very little email even when I started. But with social media, you have this immediacy with your readership. You get to bounce things off them. You get sort of an immediate reaction to how stories are being received. Just a couple of days ago, it was last week, I posted a social media post about help me decide the title of the next Sigma novel. Is that the original title of Kingdom of Bones was The Savage Zone. And if just last week, that was what was on Amazon. And my house was thinking, give us some other alternative titles. So I gave them some alternative titles, and it settled between Savage Zone and Kingdom of Bones. And they said, can you, our house is split. There's some people that like this, some people that like that, and we're sort of stuck in which direction we want to go. And I like both titles almost equally as well too. So I thought, well, why don't I just put it out there? So I went on social media and I just said, hey, everybody out there, vote. Which title do you like better? Just to get a consensus of not only what people thought, but also why, which was really interesting to see their responses on why they thought certain titles were better than the other title. So, and somebody says, the debate title was, it's not. They switched it over, but the conversation is still ongoing. The tendency, I think, at this point is that, well, not the tendency, we're leaning towards Kingdom of Bones, but it's still an ongoing debate. So that's probably why we don't have even a cover yet, because you need a title to help you come up with a cover. Yeah,
no doubt.
And yes, Bones was, someone made a joke in one of the comments, and I can't remember by email or by on Facebook, was that, there have been a few titles in the past, the Map of Bones,
right?
The Bone Labyrinth. So they were saying, are you channeling Kathy Reich, who does the, did Bones, this, the series that became the television series Bones. I don't know,
I think you might be channeling fossils from what I've seen.
Exactly.
But we've come full circle. We're going to move over to the Zoom after show in a moment, and of course, if you want to actually become the interviewer and you have any questions or comments and join us, we're going to be on bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. We'll leave some more questions for the after show, but I'll just ask you a fun question, which is,
sure.
Well, two things. One is I did notice in your list of books that one of them is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So that's
the whole conversation there is reverse engineering a script into a novel. I talked before how, when you try to make a novel into a movie, a lot has to be cut out of that novel as we trim down. I think that's why a lot of people think, the books are always better than the movie because there's so much more in the books. And so it was challenging to reverse engineer that, have a script and have it turn into a novel. So I had to innovate new scenes that are nowhere in the movie, that just had my own pure imaginations, like 12 scenes that are in the book that are never in the movie, which is fun to do. It's basically fun, to put on Indy's hat and pick up that whip and get to play Indy.
That's very cool. Well, actually, the real question that I want to ask you is, every time I read another of your novels, specifically the Sigma 4 series, I'm thinking, when is this going to be made into a movie? Because it should. But my final question for you, and then we'll move the conversation over, is who would play Ray Pierce? I'm sure you get that question all the time.
I get it all the time, and right now, part of my brain just turned off because I hate playing that game. I like seeing other people play that game, but I don't like to play that game, and I am going to refuse to answer that question. And the reason why is that once I say Gray Pierce is this actor,
right?
That's when I start picturing, because I read Harry Potter series before the movies came out, and in my head, I knew what Harry Potter looked like, from reading the books. But all of a sudden, after watching the movies, I cannot think of Harry Potter as anybody but Daniel Radcliffe. Is that Daniel Radcliffe who played Harry Potter?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So now I'm tainted. That is now, what was built, this fun character, this brilliant boy magician that was in my head, has now been crossed out, and now it's you did those awful photoshops. That's what's happened in my head, is that Daniel Radcliffe has been photoshopped onto Harry Potter's head. And I mentioned before, like, these characters are, this is the 15th novel, so I've been writing these characters for 15 years. They're part of my life. They're indelibly marked in my head, exactly what they look like. I expect to walk around the corner one day and have Kowalski coming towards me. So I'm afraid if I start assigning actors to these roles, that's who they're going to become. And that's almost fearful if the series has been optioned. So at some point, hopefully, we will see some type of television or big screen version of the stories. But I'm also a little bit fearful of both what Hollywood's going to do to that series, but also, am I going to be corrupted in that? Is that cast going to become what's in my head as that group of characters? Anyways.
You see, I thought that was a softball question because I thought you were going to say me without the glasses, but it's fine, whatever.
Oh, right. Now you've corrupted me, Joseph. Now that's what I'm going to.
Oh no, please, please.
Pierce,
do not take this head. That looks weird, by the way. Do not take that head and put him on anyone's body. This poor body has been burdened with this head for about 49 years. This has been so much fun, and I really, really appreciate it, but the time is not done yet. Just before you do go, just to let people know, the beauty of these books is you really can start anywhere, but I would recommend you start anywhere, because that was one of the takeaways from today. The first step is always the most powerful step. But The Last Odyssey is now available in paperback. And as you now know, James's new short story compilation, The Best of His Stories, Unrestricted Access, is due out shortly. And then, of course, if you needed more, and we could all do with a little bit more James Rollins, the new book, Kingdom of Bones, or it could be something else, Cover to Be Revealed, is going to be out in 2021. I will tell you at a very minimum, you have had at least one sale today, because I just pre-ordered my Kindle copy just before you came on. But this has been fantastic. I just want to say you can follow him on Twitter, James Rollins. You can find out more about his projects, about Sigma, how to join the conversation, how to join the community at jamesrollins.com. Anything else you want to add just before we head on over?
I was just thinking that maybe I should change the title of that new novel to "Cover to be Revealed." That might just work right there. That could be the title.
You know, I mean, and then we'll vote on it as well. All right, Jim, thank you so much. And for those of you, you can continue to watch on Facebook. Otherwise, we're going to head on over to Zoom. And I will be back tomorrow with another episode of CoronaTV. So thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, Jim. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you for watching CoronaTV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. CoronaTV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/CoronaTV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text CoronaTV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.